Gianni Versace.
There's something inherently sexy in a Versace design. There is a flamboyance that is contained and controlled. The clothes we wear send a message about how the world perceives us.
It says a real wow factor.
I'm Tim Gunn, and I am the mentor on Project Runway. The Versace customer was not faint of heart. One of the most iconic Versace pieces was the gown that he made for Elizabeth Hurley. 2 stars were born with that dress. Princess Diana wanted a whole new look for the world. And Courtney loved it also. I mean, he took her from trashy to sophisticated.
Versace helped put Miami on the international map. My name is Tara Solomon, and I am the Miami Herald's former nightlife correspondent. Versace brought his entire world of fabulosity. And while he may have had homes all around the world, he came to Miami Beach to relax.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that Versace had been murdered?
Oh, I remember profoundly. I opened up my computer and it flashed before me that Gianni Versace had been murdered. I was stunned.
When Versace was killed, there was pure pandemonium.
On that particular morning, Gianni Versace decided to go over to the News Cafe, and it was on his return home, approaching the door, he was shot and killed.
And all of a sudden we hear bang, bang, 2 shots.
1116 Ocean? Yes, massive shot. Please, immediately, please.
Do you remember where roughly he was?
He was right here.
And there was obviously blood.
Yes, plenty of blood.
If you mention Gianni Versace, people still don't remember those names of the first few people that were killed.
There was the homicide of Jeff Trail and David Mattson. There was the murder of Lee Miglin. Then there was the murder of William Reese. We have what we typically call a spree killer. This wasn't a haphazard crime. Mr. Versace was targeted.
World-famous fashion designer Gianni Versace fatally shot.
Gunned down outside his mansion in Miami Beach, Florida.
Turned into a gruesome crime scene early this morning.
5 days before he was murdered, Gianni Versace and his partner Antonio D'Amico had arrived at Casa Casuarina, their lavish Miami Beach retreat. They'd been in Paris and New York. Versace could not have known it, but his killer was already in town. The 911 call came in about 8:45 the morning of July 15th, 1997, just as Carlos Noriega, then a lieutenant with the Miami Beach Police Department, was heading to work.
I drove over to the scene and encountered an area just flooded with police officers. There was evidence at the front steps, there was blood, there was clothing. Gianni Versace was an icon. You have a world-renowned fashion designer, a celebrity, who was tragically killed. This was all hands on deck.
Yeah, you don't want to screw this case up.
Exactly.
It all happened in broad daylight. Versace had gone out alone to a local cafe to buy magazines, and then he walked home.
As he was putting the key in the door lock, and he was shot twice, once in the face point-blank range, and the other one was behind the left ear in the neck, and that was a through-and-through shot.
Noriega believes the gunman approached Versace from behind or from the side.
I believe he was shadowing him. It was a very strategically timed, strategically placed attack to kill Gianni Versace.
The question was, who would want to kill him?
One of the first motives that we felt was a possibility was that it was a contract hit or organized crime, mafia, if you will, because there was a dead bird found next to the body.
Is that a sign?
To us, that's a sign of a mafia hit.
But the bird, it turned out, was in the wrong place at the wrong time, hit by a fragment from a bullet that killed Versace. And that left police with not much to go on. But not for long. They got a break from Lazzaro Quintana, who was a friend of Versace's.
He used to call me Lazzaretta.
Lazzaro was at the mansion that morning. He was in the dining room with Antonio when he heard the shots.
But Antonio got up and he went to the window that faces the gate to enter the mansion. And he yelled out, "No, no." And I ran out.
You came here?
I came here. Johnny was right here.
Versace was already dead on the front steps.
And then Antonio came and he's crying and he was destroyed. He was destroyed. And he's who did this? Who did this? And there was a lady standing here and she's pointing, but she couldn't speak. Antonio said, "Go get him." So I went after him.
Lazzaro followed the gunman.
We're talking this pace, real fast. I yelled, "You bastard! Why did you do this? Why did you do this?" He makes a left turn. As he makes the left turn, yes, he makes the left turn, and we're still going all the way through. He turns over to the right, and car's coming, so I couldn't get across. Car stops, and they yell, "He's got a gun." He stops right across here at the alley, and that's when he's pointing the gun at me.
Show me how he pointed the gun at you, if I'm you. So he didn't even look at you?
No, never looked at...
You never saw his face?
I never saw his face.
But you saw his clothes?
Yes.
The shooter cut through this alley while Lazzaro raced around the corner. He remembered seeing a police officer there earlier.
I reached him and I said to him, "Mr. Versace has just been shot."
Were you calm, or were you...
No.
No?
No. A friend of mine was just shot. No, was I calm? I was nervous. I was upset.
You came down this street with the police officer.
I did.
Luckily, he came upon some men in front of this building and asked them if they saw a man running.
And they pointed. They pointed to the garage.
He said he went in here.
He went in here. So that's when I told the officer, I said, "He's in there, go get him, go get him." And then we heard over the radio the commotion and okay, now there is a manhunt.
When police searched the 13th Street garage, they discovered a pile of clothes. A gray t-shirt and black shorts, just what Lazzaro had seen the shooter wearing. He had obviously changed clothes.
When he walked out of this garage just shortly after the murder, nobody knew who the shooter was, nobody knew what he looked like, nobody knew what he was wearing. He was able to just vanish.
But he left a mountain of evidence for investigators. Next to that pile of clothes was a truck that had been reported stolen in New Jersey. And inside the truck were documents with a name.
I mean, he left his identification in the truck?
That's correct. He had his passport, ID, a whole lot of items that connected him right away.
By 12 noon, some 3 hours after Gianni Versace was murdered, police had a suspect. His name, Andrew Cunanan. And as it turned out, the Miami Beach Police Department was not the only one looking for him.
In Milan, Italy today, those who knew and admired Gianni Versace said goodbye to the murdered fashion designer.
1 week after Gianni Versace was murdered, celebrities and friends from around the world gathered inside this Gothic cathedral in Milan, Italy, for his funeral.
I saw Versace's funeral on television, and I cried. It was hard. It was tough. Princess Diana was there at the funeral. Sting, Trudy, Elton.
In Miami, not far from where he was murdered, there was a small, intimate service to celebrate the designer's life. The flowers left on the steps of Versace's opulent mansion served as one somber reminder of what had happened.
We consider Andrew Cunanan to be armed and to be extremely dangerous.
The police activity was another. They were tracking every lead they could, hunting for Gianni Versace's suspected killer, 27-year-old Andrew Cunanan.
He had a very good suspect.
Michael Band was the prosecutor assigned to this case.
And our first step was to go out into community with pictures of Cunanan and start beating the bushes and looking for this guy, looking to figure out, is this the guy?
Authorities were starting to learn all about Andrew Cunanan. 3 months before Versace's murder, Cunanan was living in San Diego, and his life was, to say the least, complicated.
I thought he'd be a very successful businessman, or maybe in the fashion industry, or something star quality like.
Back in the 80s, Robert Aarons remembers his 7th grade classmate Andrew Cunanan as a good-looking kid with a keen fashion sense.
I remember Andrew would put dimes in his penny loafers. It was always that little extra something that made him sort of stand out and get noticed. Andrew sort of had this air about him that I thought was kind of beyond his years at that time.
According to Aarons, Andrew Cunanan grew up in a working-class San Diego suburb and did not share much about his home life.
I had no idea who his mom was, his dad, whether he had brothers or sisters. I had no idea who was half Filipino.
Andrew's father, Modesto, was a former Navy man turned stockbroker. He and Andrew's mother, Mary Ann, raised 4 children together. But Andrew stood out. He had a genius IQ, so he enrolled in the pricey and prestigious Bishop School in the Tony Beach enclave of La Jolla.
When I heard that he was going to La Jolla and transferring to Bishop's, I thought, well, you've got to have money. That's a private school.
The class of 1987 mentioned Andrew Cunanan as most likely to be remembered. He chose a quote from King Louis XV to accompany his senior photo, "Après moi, le déluge." After me, the deluge. Turns out those words could have been an omen. A year after Andrew's high school graduation, his father was facing embezzlement charges. He fled the country, leaving his family abandoned and broke.
He was openly gay in high school and very flamboyant. And
when 48 Hours first spoke to Nicole Murray Ramirez back in 1997, he knew Andrew Cunanan. Today, he still remembers Cunanan as the young man who didn't have a job, but was a big spender and an even bigger talker.
Andrew Cunanan was basically known in the gay community's nightlife and the bar scene. He would walk in with an entourage and always pay for the bill. He wanted the illusion that it was his money. He tried to brag that he came from a Filipino family and he knew the Imelda Marcos.
Michael Williams owned a local restaurant and knew Andrew Cunanan. He also knew where Cunanan really got all that money.
He had a very wealthy older partner who really provided for him.
How much older?
I would say probably by 40 years.
What did you make of that relationship?
I stopped trying to figure that out. I was like, here's this young, attractive, good-looking guy with this extremely older man. I mean, I can't imagine what the connection was there.
I would imagine that you had an idea what the connection was there.
I did, you know.
Michael Williams was introduced to Andrew through their mutual friend, a young ensign named Jeff Trail.
Andrew was very pretentious, loud, you know, always had to be the center of the party. Jeff was opposite of that. Jeff was pretty conservative and quiet, always helping people.
Trail was an Annapolis graduate and a Gulf War veteran living in San Diego. He was also gay, as out as was possible.
Tonight on 48 Hours, the battle over homosexuals in the military.
In 1993, when he appeared in Silhouette for a 48 Hours interview, he talked to us about issues affecting gay people in the military.
We're not here to be feared, we just want to do our jobs. That's all we're asking for.
While Trail and Cunanan were friends, to the best of anybody's knowledge, that is all they were.
Jeff was always, had the contagious personality that where you just wanted to be around him. And I think that, you know, in a way, Andrew wanted that in his life. So surrounding himself around Jeff, he always seemed very happy and up.
You did not like Andrew?
No.
For reasons known only to Cunanan, he sometimes used the name Andrew De Silva. That's how Michael Williams knew him, and he would soon learn a lot more about Andrew. Who he was and what he would do would change the life of Michael Williams and end the lives of 5 innocent victims. Tracing Andrew Cunanan's blood-soaked path to Gianni Versace's front door means following a series of unexplainable events punctuated with unfathomable viciousness. None of the dots are easily connected, except in the mind of the murderer. The road begins with Jeff Trail.
He just had that charisma about him.
It was Trail who befriended Andrew Cunanan, and Michael Williams believes his friend knew Cunanan had lived a dangerous life.
Andrew had a past of dealing drugs. He had a past of prostitution. And I really think that Jeff was trying to pull him out of that.
Williams says Jeff Trail had left the Navy and was training to join the California Highway Patrol. And then, suddenly, and with no explanation, in the fall of 1996, Trail moved to Minneapolis.
The day that he got in the car to leave, I said, please be safe. And he reached under the seat and he pulled out his handgun. And he said, I'm going to be safe. I've got this.
Around that same time, Jeff Trail's friend, Andrew Cunanan, was struggling, according to Nicole Murray Ramirez.
He was not good looking anymore. He had to have looked in the mirror and saw what I saw, which was a 6 going down to a 4. What was left for his life?
Cunanan had gained weight and given away much of his expensive designer wardrobe.
He had dabbled into drugs. He was now an older young man with average looks.
On top of that, his older, wealthy partner broke up with him.
I surmise that Andrew one day woke up after his older boyfriend broke up the relationship. And what's next? How is he going to live?
He lost the money, the mansion, and all that went with it.
He lived off other people. He also was someone who was revengeful.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
This is not someone that you break up with easily, because when you're grandiose and you're the center of the world, people don't break up with you.
And then, for reasons Cunanan never fully explained, on Friday, April 25th, 1997, he went to Minneapolis. He flew from San Diego on a one-way ticket.
Do you think that he went up to Minneapolis with murder on his mind?
Yes, I think that he did.
Cunanan knew people in Minneapolis. Jeff Trail was there. And Michael Williams thinks something happened between the two of them.
I called to check on Jeff, and he was just really depressed. It alarmed me. We'd never had a conversation like that. I asked him, have you spoken to Andrew? And he said, no, and I'll never speak to him again. That's odd.
Cunanan knew somebody else in Minneapolis, a 33-year-old architect named David Madsen. Cunanan and Madsen had had a relationship.
He loved to laugh.
I'm just gonna have a little lunch, okay?
And he always had big energy.
Julie Hovland was David Madsen's friend and co-worker.
He liked problem solving. We talked about world issues. He was a down-to-earth person.
Did David ever mention Andrew Cunanan?
Yes, he did. I think he had a fling with Andrew. I don't think it was anything serious because there were other people in his life that he cared about more. He didn't care about Andrew that much, really.
But according to Cunanan's friends, Andrew believed David was the love of his life. Julie Hovland didn't talk to David Madsen over the weekend. On Monday, she was surprised when he didn't show up at work. And by Tuesday, everyone was worried.
I called him, went to voice messaging, and a couple of my coworkers went to his house over lunch hour on Tuesday, heard his dog barking in the apartment.
She didn't know it, but Cunanan's killing spree had already started.
It was noticeable as soon as you open the door and walk in. Nobody made any effort to try and conceal it or hide it.
When retired Minneapolis homicide detective Dale Barsness arrived at Madsen's apartment, what he saw was gruesome. There was a bloody body wrapped in a rug.
I thought he was dead that day. I pretty much cried the whole night. And then later we found out that it wasn't David's body in the carpet.
How did you feel when you heard that?
Shocked, but then, oh, what happened?
The body in David Madsen's apartment was Jeff Trail. He had been beaten to death with a hammer. And not far from the body, police found a duffel bag with a name on it, Andrew Cunanan.
This is the travel bag that we believe Andrew Cunanan brought to Minneapolis on April 25th.
But where was Andrew Cunanan, and where was David Madsen? The trail stayed cold for just 4 days, and then on Saturday morning, 2 fishermen found the body of a young man on the shores of East Rush Lake, about an hour north of Minneapolis. It was David Madsen. He'd been shot in the head.
We learned that David died pretty soon after Jeff Trail. Oh my gosh, you know, to be in the situation that David's in with this crazy person, you know, and how scary for him. I'm sure he tried to calm Andrew down. You know, I mean, I'm sure there was survival mode going on, like how do you diffuse the situation? But he obviously failed at that, and he lost his life because of that.
Ballistic tests showed the bullets used to kill Madsen came from a .40 caliber gun, like the one Jeff Trail had taken to Minneapolis. Police believe Cunanan took that gun.
Presumably, when you were able to link Madsen's death to Trail's death, that changed the whole investigation.
And now we're down to, where's Andrew?
There were tire tracks near Madsen's body, and his car, a red Jeep, was missing. But it would not stay missing for long.
72-year-old Lee Miglin was found tortured and stabbed to death in the garage of his mansion on Chicago's Gold Coast.
On the morning of May 3rd, 1997, Stephen and Barbara Byer found the body of their neighbor, Lee Miglin. He was a wealthy real estate developer.
I can still picture it today. I could see the points of his shoes. And I said, Lee is right there. I mean, it was absolutely chilling.
Inside Lee Miglin's townhouse, there was some money and other things missing, and there was evidence the killer had stayed a while. Police photos show he had shaved and taken a bath.
Debris in the kitchen sink, melted ice cream coming out of their containers. Then in Lee's library, finding this large ham sliced sitting on his desk. That was plenty to recognize that something very, very bad had gone on.
Around the corner from the murder scene, police would discover David Madsen's red Jeep. But now Lee Miglin's green Lexus was missing. To this day, police do not know what, if any, connection Cunanan had to Miglin. But they feared Cunanan would strike again.
I do know it's not a random act of violence.
A nationwide manhunt is still underway for Cunanan.
After Andrew Cunanan murdered Jeff Trail, David Madsen, and Lee Miglin, the gay community was terrified, especially in San Diego.
I think everybody was in a state of shock. I think some people were in a state of fear. People didn't answer their doors. People that knew him the most stayed other places.
Michael Williams relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona.
Everybody was on very high alert.
Because you didn't know where he was going to strike again.
Yeah.
Just 6 days after he killed Miglin, while Cunanan was on the run in Miglin's green Lexus, police believe he realized the FBI was tracking the car phone's signal, and he needed a new vehicle.
He's believed to have struck here in Pennsville Friday afternoon at the remote Finns Point Cemetery at Fort Mott Park.
FBI is going to work it concurrently with the New Jersey State Police.
The Lexus was found at this cemetery in southern New Jersey. Inside the office lay victim number 4. He was 45-year-old William Reese. He'd been shot in the head, and his red pickup was gone.
Yeah, all he was a caretaker at a cemetery.
Minneapolis Detective Dale Barsness says William Reese was killed simply for his truck.
You know, he just was a very honorable man.
In the wrong place.
Absolutely.
At the wrong time.
And alone.
You're ensconced somewhere in Scottsdale. He's last heard of in New Jersey. Can you relax?
No. Until he's caught, you don't relax.
As Gianni Versace was in Europe working on what would be his final collection, Andrew Cunanan was the focus of a nationwide manhunt. He was featured on America's Most Wanted.
Police say Cunanan may be wearing glasses.
And earned a spot on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list.
You think he enjoyed the attention that he got?
Oh, I absolutely do.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole.
He basically held the United States hostage because we were looking for him everywhere. We didn't know where he was.
O'Toole says, having murdered 4 men in 3 states over 12 days, Cunanan was now considered a spree killer.
A spree killer continues and continues and continues and does not go back into their normal life. Life as they know it, it's done.
So O'Toole believes Cunanan knew he had nothing to lose.
There's no way to undo what he's done now. Absolutely no way. So he's really boxed himself into a corner. From a behavioral standpoint, that makes him more dangerous.
But then, for 2 months, there was no sign of Cunanan. Until July 15th, 1997, when he struck again. This time was different, because this time, his victim was Johnny Versace.
When you heard that he had done it again, do you remember how you felt?
Every time there was another killing, it was almost like you're being stabbed, you know? It's that rush of pain, and you're just automatically, oh my God, why can't they catch him?
There's no question that he knew that we were hot on this trail.
Carlos Noriega remembers that within hours, hundreds of police officers piled onto Miami Beach.
We all but locked down the causeways and the ways in and out of the city. And I believe that created that bottleneck where he felt uncomfortable trying to leave the city.
Crime Stoppers.
With all the attention on this case, every day brought a flood of tips.
How long ago?
The tips that were coming in were overwhelming at times.
Especially since this was Detective Gus Sanchez's first homicide investigation.
Were you nervous at all?
Of course I was.
Yeah.
We know already that he had killed numerous people. I remember going to different locations, knocking on doors. And it always crosses your mind that Cunanan can be in there armed and he can shoot through the door.
Detectives soon learned Cunanan had been in Miami Beach for about 2 months.
He was sort of hiding in plain sight.
Exactly.
The police had missed several opportunities to get him. About a week before he killed Versace, Cunanan pawned a gold coin stolen from Lee Miglin. How'd the pawn shop know it was him? He told them.
Pawned the coin about a week before the homicide.
And used his own name.
Used his own name.
What's more, Cunanan's name was on a form the pawn shop was required to send to the Miami Beach Police Department. It arrived 5 days before the murder.
We did not have an automated system at the time.
It was just one of many forms, and unfortunately, nobody looked at it.
Did you think, why didn't we know about this before Johnny Versace was killed?
That thought went through my mind several times because apparently he was on the beach for a period of time.
Cunanan listed his address as the Normandy Plaza Hotel.
It was a dump. You and I wouldn't stay in that hotel.
He'd registered under his own name.
Must drive you nuts to know that this guy was walking around free as a bird.
Right. I mean, just the fact that this guy was being looked for speaks to the fact that he was able to blend in and change his appearance and successfully just stay one step ahead that way.
Things might have turned out differently if police had a little more luck. 4 days before Versace was killed, someone at this sub shop recognized Cunanan from the America's Most Wanted story. He called the police, but they arrived too late.
I was disappointed. I was frustrated. It's just unfortunate that we didn't catch him before it happened.
After Versace's murder, with Cunanan on the loose, anxiety grew.
Let me assure you that Miami Beach and Dade County are safe.
I was afraid.
Remember, Versace's friend, Lazaro Quintana, had chased Cunanan.
So I told the officer, go get him. He's in there. Go get him. He knew who I was, but I didn't know who he was.
How did you behave when you were out?
Scared, cautious, looking over my shoulder a lot.
Literally? I mean,
absolutely. Oh, yeah, I mean, I got goosebumps on it, absolutely. This man had a gun. This man knew what he was doing.
The longer Cunanan dodged police, the more intense the hunt became.
I think the police were getting anxious. Where could he be? What kind of resources did he have?
Former prosecutor Michael Band.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure on law enforcement. The whole world's watching, but we don't want anybody else dead.
There was a sense that maybe we lost him by some people. I just thought that he was hiding out.
And then the tip came in that would change everything.
Here we go, guys. Here we go.
I get a call, Michael, I think we found him.
What's your emergency? Somebody got in and they're shooting.
I heard over the police radio that there had been a shot fired, that they were surrounding a houseboat.
You think what?
We got him.
After a 9-day manhunt, Miami Beach detective Gus Sanchez believed Andrew Cunanan was finally cornered on a houseboat just 40 blocks from where he had shot down Johnny Versace. When Sanchez arrived, it was a standoff.
At this point, nobody's seen Cunanan on the houseboat.
No, there's no confirmation at this point.
The houseboat's caretaker saw signs of a break-in, and when he went inside, a shot was fired. Police quickly surrounded the houseboat.
They are communicating by bullhorn with the houseboat.
After a 4-hour siege, the SWAT team fired tear gas and went on board. When it was safe, prosecutor Michael Band followed them.
It was a mess. It was just a mess.
In an upstairs bedroom, they found a body.
I just recall an individual lying on the bed, looking up. He had a bullet wound in his head. There's a gun next to him.
When you looked at that face, what did your gut tell you?
My gut told me it's him.
But that wasn't enough.
I wanted his fingerprints.
As Band waited, an expert at the scene compared fingerprints from the corpse with Cunanan's.
He looks up and he says, it's him.
The reign of terror brought upon us by Andrew Cunanan is over.
It turned out Cunanan shot himself with the same gun he used to kill Johnny Versace, William Reese, and David Madsen. It was the gun he had taken from his friend and first victim, Jeff Trail.
There's a sense of relief.
But this was not the outcome Michael Williams hoped for.
I didn't want him to do anything but go to jail and rot.
Andrew Cunanan's suicide left the world with a pile of questions. Was there any connection between Johnny Versace and Andrew Cunanan? There have always been rumors. There is no hard evidence.
Do you think they knew each other?
I think there's a strong possibility that they crossed paths before.
And that plays into his motive. I think so. I think they knew each other. Or he wanted to be in his circle and maybe he was rejected. And this is all speculation.
There is some sense it's not complete. Why did he do it? What was the folks in Minnesota? Why Chicago? Why New Jersey? Why Versace? Was there a connection there? Was this just some sort of serendipitous, unfortunate occasion where just two lives intersected at the wrong time?
And we'll never know.
We'll never know.
20 years after Versace's death, Tim Gunn says Versace's influence still lives.
Sexy, alluring, gorgeous red carpet gowns, it's all attributable to Gianni Versace.
Singer Bruno Mars not only wears Versace, he mentions Versace in one of his songs.
If guys like Bruno Mars are singing about Johnny Versace 20 years after his death, what in your mind does that say about Johnny Versace?
That he's fully embedded in our society and culture and has a profound legacy.
I feel his presence when I'm designing.
Leanna Aguilar, a Project Runway contestant, was just a teenager when Versace was killed.
There are Versace elements in what you're wearing today, right?
Yes. Tim Gunn saw this and he said, "This looks like Versace," and I was like, yes, mission accomplished.
Of course, the memories are infinitely more personal for Michael Williams, who lost his best friend. And 2 decades later, it still hurts.
This hasn't left you.
I'm better. It's taken me years. You know, if it was just Jeff being killed, would be one thing. But then you got David and Lee Miglin and William Reese and Johnny Versace. 5 people that you're now connected to.
It is a connection no one would ever seek. The world lost an icon, but 5 families lost loved ones, friends lost friends, all for a reason we'll never know, if there ever was one.
I don't think the grieving ever ends. It evolves. We've been wanting to tell Amie's story and just felt like we weren't ready before. But now we feel like we can do it.
I was so proud of her and what she's accomplished.
Oh my goodness. Fire eater, dancer, photographer, model, therapist. She wanted to fix people.
You might want to speak to this woman, Dr. Amie Harwick.
As a licensed marriage and family therapist, I see all kinds of different things, anxiety, depression, change of life stuff, breakups, moves, things like that.
Amie helped me so much. I had gone to see Amie because I had dealt with a relationship that got very out of control and turned into a very serious stalking case.
Jealousy can become dangerous and even lead to violence. It can lead to death.
I want emergency, operator 434.
Yeah, somebody just attacked my roommate. Please get a cop here.
I just was woken up by screaming, like blood-curdling scream. And then I realized that the screaming wasn't stopping or slowing down. And I yelled up, Amie. And I heard choking right after that. I knew we were in trouble. This is for real. This is really happening. I knew we needed help. Like, I'm gonna have to make a break for it.
When the first responders first got that call, where did they go?
They came right here to this house.
Hey, sir. Hi. How can I help you?
My roommate was attacked. I know it. I heard it. She's screaming. She was thrown to the ground.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Michael Herman was out here. He's frantic. He's nervous.
They didn't know what to think of this guy.
Right. They had no idea of who he was, why he was involved in all this. They knew he was rambling on. They had some doubts about him originally.
I think there's okay, sir, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Calm down. Calm down. Other than your roommate, is there anybody else inside the house?
I don't know.
Thanks.
And I'm walking them around to the back of the house. And it's dark back there. There's some light, but it's pretty dark back there.
And when they get around to the back, now they can see a body on the ground.
Sir, come here.
I remember not knowing what I was seeing, and afterwards realizing it was Amie.
Really what hit me was the way that she was killed. So heartbreaking that her, of all people, had to be taken in the way that she was.
I said, I know who did it. I just knew it. I was the only person she was afraid of. It's the only one she was ever afraid of.
Take a seat. Take a seat.
Oh my God. Hey, we need it. Oh my God. What happened to you?
In the early morning darkness of February 15, 2020, police body cameras were recording as Amie Harwick, barely clinging to life outside of her Hollywood Hills home, was taken to a hospital.
If she says anything in the hospital, I need to know that.
As EMTs tried to save Amie, officers from the Los Angeles Police Department tried to make sense of the scene. Amie's roommate, Michael Herman, appeared to be the only witness. He told officers an intruder had attacked Amie.
I swear to you, that was a struggle by her.
But is there any sign of the intruder?
There wasn't.
Scott Masterson was the lead detective.
All we knew when we showed up was that a female was found on the ground in the back of the house. We're wide open to what really went on.
Even open to the possibility that this wasn't foul play at all. When officers searched the three-story house, they found Amie's purse, jacket, and broken necklace on the floor. Not exactly telltale signs of a crime. And a discovery on Amie's balcony made them wonder if this could have been an accident or even suicide.
On the deck of the balcony, we found a medium-sized syringe, and it was loaded with a yellowish-brown substance.
Yeah, it's heroin.
When the officers first saw that, they thought, what, was this some kind of drug deal or
Yeah,
incident?
exactly. Or maybe she was using drugs and fell over. They didn't know.
Sir, do you know her history of drug use?
No, she's sober. She doesn't drink it. She didn't even drink.
She doesn't drink.
She doesn't even drink. She's sober.
And when I first saw it, I said, that's not heroin.
Not heroin, but he didn't know what it was. But what did you think? Wasn't that odd?
Very odd. Very strange.
And very strange to investigators, says Masterson, was that Michael had blood on his shirt. And although he said he was a roommate, he didn't have his keys to the house when first responders arrived.
They don't know if he's part of the problem, part of the solution.
Hey, he might be a suspect, dude, because he's got blood on him.
So, they're thinking, was he in a fight with her?
That was not true. Michael Herman is telling his story publicly for the first time about the events on the night of Valentine's Day, 2020, and into the early hours of the next day. The word nightmare isn't even a big enough word, is it?
No.
Amie had gone out with friends, and Michael was in his downstairs bedroom.
I'd been mostly nodding on and off. I remember what sounded like a plate drop and being woken up by it.
Thinking it was Amie's cat, he says he fell back asleep. He later woke up to Amie returning home and that blood-curdling scream. He then heard what sounded like Amie being thrown to the floor and later choked. The sound made you feel that there was someone up with her.
I knew for a fact there was somebody up there after that. I'm trying to listen. You don't know for sure what's going on. Was he acting alone? Was there more than one person? I start rushing to look for my phone.
But Michael says he couldn't find his phone. He then started yelling to scare the intruder.
I remember thinking, like, this is so much worse than any horror movie I've ever seen. You're realizing that to save her, like, you've got to make the decision to leave her. It was such a hard decision.
Michael fled the house to get help, but when he got to the front gate, it was locked. He climbed over a fence, cutting himself on spiked rods. Frantically, he ran to the next-door neighbor's house. That neighbor's surveillance camera shows Michael knocking on the door, but no one answers.
I just kind of panicked, feeling like a lot of time had already passed.
He then ran into someone on the street and used their phone to call 911.
You guys need to get a cop here, quick.
Sir, the officers are on the way.
After spending hours at the scene, investigators found something in the light of day that they had missed before. A broken window from a French door on the ground floor with blood nearby.
And so as soon as we saw that, okay, this is our point of entry. We have a crime here. Somebody broke into this house and did this.
So this was the first piece of evidence that said to you, Mike Herman might be telling you the truth.
Correct. Correct.
Later at the Hollywood police station, Michael told Masterson about the person he believed was responsible.
Told them she had an ex-boyfriend that she had a restraining order against that had expired. I don't know his name, but Robert would know his name.
Robert is Robert Koshland, one of Amy's closest friends. We first spoke to Robert in 2020. He told us what he told police.
They were like, do you know who might have, could have done this? And I was like, yeah, Gareth.
Gareth Pershouse, an old boyfriend whom Amie had had a troubled relationship with when they dated almost 10 years earlier.
I was like, you need to go find this guy right away.
Masterson then broke the news to Robert and Michael. Amie had died at the hospital. She was 38 years old. How difficult was it to hear that Amie didn't make it?
It's still difficult to hear.
As investigators worked to find Amy's ex-boyfriend, they also tried to find Amy's parents, Penny and Tom Harwick, in Pennsylvania. The Harwicks remember getting ready for bed when there was a knock at the door. It was the local police.
And he said, Amy's been murdered.
It's a blur right now.
I don't know how to describe it.
Just devastated.
Penny and Tom's life with Amie began when they adopted her as an 11-month-old baby. Do you remember the first time you saw your little girl?
Oh, I absolutely remember. Kind of like a fairy tale. It's like, here's this beautiful little girl sitting there, and she's going to come home with us and be our daughter. It was wonderful.
And believe it or not, she had a head full of curls.
And her hair was honey-colored. By the time she was 4, it was so dark.
Around that same time, the Harwicks adopted their son, Chris.
And she was okay with it for a couple of weeks, and then she said, well, when is he going back? And I said, well, he's not. He's your brother. He's going to be here forever.
How would you describe your sister?
Amie was a very interesting character. She was into heavy metal and rock music, going to concerts.
And Amie got her parents in on the action, too.
She turned Penny and I into metalheads, or head bangers.
Seriously?
Seriously.
And she would always manage to get either backstage or to meet the performers. That's just who she was.
After high school, Amie met Tommy Decker, a drummer from LA, at a local concert. The two began dating long distance.
And then she said, I want to move out there. I want to move out to LA.
In 2001, she headed west. She was 20 years old.
She needed to find out who she was. She needed to do that for herself.
Soon, the couple tied the knot, but after a 3-year marriage, Tommy and Amie divorced. It wasn't until 2009 that Amie would go on to meet Gareth Pershouse, the man police suspected had killed her, and whom they were now searching for.
Heartbreak for a local neighborhood after a well-known therapist was killed at her Hollywood Hills home.
People have left flowers here for Amie Harwick, and her friends and family are hoping for justice.
I was very confident that, Gareth Pershouse was our guy.
Within 13 hours of Amie Harwick's death on February 15, 2020, police descended on Gareth Pershouse's beachside neighborhood to arrest him.
You could tell he was playing the old, what's this about? Why do you want to talk? Who? Oh, yeah, I know Amie, sure, yeah. He basically was saying, I've been at home.
Detectives weren't buying that story or the explanation Pershouse gave for what appeared to be a fresh black eye. He blamed a home renovation.
I said, I think you better get a contractor. If you get a hold of a power tool, you're going to be in real trouble.
Pershouse was charged with Amie's murder on February 19, 2020. And detectives were learning about his troubled past beginning not long after he and Amie began dating in 2009.
They seemed like a pretty fun couple and kind of nice to see, friends get together.
When we first spoke to Rudy Torres in 2020, he talked about how the couple met. Amie, then working as a model and dancer, would often run into Purse House, an events photographer, at flashy LA parties.
If you would meet him, you would think he's charming, a little goofy, kind of dorky.
He wasn't a musician like she normally dated.
No, and she was trying to break that habit.
Purse House was also a computer expert and an aspiring comedian.
Here he is, one more time for Gareth, everybody, come on.
I have bad news for the entertainers over there. The best day of your career is going to be the days after you die.
But oddly, says Amy's mother, Penny, her daughter didn't share much else about him. And why do you think that is?
Well, maybe she was already feeling like he wasn't who she thought he was.
And Penny says her daughter never shared how volatile the 2-year relationship had become.
She'd gone through quite a bit with Gareth. There was a number of police reports that were made.
Detectives learned that Amie had called police to report several violent incidents over the years. She said that on multiple occasions, Gareth Pursehouse had choked, suffocated, and punched her with a closed fist. And she even documented her injuries with these photos. But Amy's father, Tom, says Amie didn't share just how bad things had gotten.
She didn't go into details.
Do you think she just wanted to protect the two of you?
Yes, yes.
After Amie ended the relationship, she took steps to protect herself, obtaining a restraining order against Pursehouse in 2012. But while she was trying to distance herself from him, Rudy says Pursehouse could not let her go.
He always wanted to get a hold of her, and I used to tell him that he should just leave her alone, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And then he cut me off.
In the years after their breakup, Amie told her parents that her home was broken into. On one occasion, strangely, the only things taken were personal photos. And on another, her computer was wiped clean. And did she think it was Gareth?
She did.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But no way of proving.
No way of proving anything. Of course we were worried, but then we also felt like, well, she's done with him. It's over. And it was never over.
And Penny says Amie was thriving, getting a degree to become a licensed therapist.
Hi, this is Dr. Amie Harwick, licensed marriage and family therapist.
Amie posted therapy videos on her social media.
You can seek therapy to address an issue like depression, anxiety, a breakup. You can also seek therapy to be a better you.
But even as Amie focused on helping others, she couldn't quite shake the shadows from her past. She lost a job as a youth counselor, Penny says, after a prospective employer was anonymously sent nude photos of her. Amie believed Pursehouse was behind it.
She was really upset about it, and then she wasn't sure what she was going to do.
Despite that obstacle, Amie studied for a PhD in human sexuality, earning the title doctor. She took a special interest in marginalized groups, sex workers, and vulnerable women. And she doesn't stop. She
bounced right back.
I wrote a book called The New Sex Bible for Women.
No, she didn't stop. She would work with these groups of people that she felt were underrepresented and needed help.
What was Dr. Harwick's reputation?
Dr. Amie Harwick had an amazing reputation. I had a lot of mutual friends that had seen her.
Emily Sears, a model who's graced the cover of Maxim magazine, first started seeing Dr. Amie Harwick in 2017, in part to help her overcome anxiety she had around dating and intimacy.
I felt that she was relatable. Well, I didn't know just exactly how relatable it was.
Even when she opened up to Amie about an abusive ex-boyfriend who had stalked her, Emily says Amie never told her about her own similar experience.
And that still is something that I am struggling to process, knowing that I was sitting across from her and she had been through so much that was similar.
As Amie was helping Emily work through her issues around dating, Amie was taking a chance on a new man in her own life.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Drew Carey, comedian and host of The Price is Right on CBS.
She was obviously really beautiful. She was really smart. She just wanted to help people, especially women.
We spoke to Carey in 2022. He said it wasn't long after meeting Amie at a party that he decided she was the one.
And I said, if this keeps going the way it's going, I'm going to marry her.
And what happened?
What happened was he ended up taking her to Paris on New Year's Eve and proposing to her. She accepted.
Drew and Amie shared the news on his show soon after.
I'd like to introduce you to my brand new lovely fiance, Amie. How you doing, Amie?
But instead of spending the rest of their lives together, later that year, the couple split up. How did she take the breakup?
She was devastated. I mean, she broke it off. And I think that's because, well, fame was getting in the way.
That's because, says Penny, Amie feared that with the added public attention she was getting while on the arm of a celebrity, she could be putting herself in danger.
You know who was watching, and it made her worry.
It hit home a lot after Amie passed in the way that she did. How dangerous it really is for women.
Emily Sears, one of Amie Harwick's therapy clients, was shaken by the news of her death.
The reality is we're not safe. Nobody is.
In dealing with some domestic violence case, this was a bit different because the way Gareth Purcell's acted in this case was more methodical.
When Deputy District Attorney Victor Avila took on the case, he was particularly troubled by evidence that Purcell had broken into Amie's house, hoping to catch her off guard when she arrived home.
And that's at the point that we decided to charge not only the murder charge, but also the special circumstance of lying in wait. These are the crime scene notes.
Avila, along with his co-counsel, Deputy District Attorney Catherine Mariano, reviewed surveillance and body camera video, interviews with Amie's family and friends, and compiled a timeline of the events leading up to the murder.
It became very clear to me that his obsession drove his intent to kill her.
They believe that Purcell's obsession with Amie was ignited when he saw her at this award show about a month before her murder. It was a chance encounter. Purcell working the gig as a photographer. Amie smiling for the cameras, enjoying the limelight. But moments earlier, off camera, witnesses say an angry Purcell confronted her. Penny Harwick recalls Amie telling her she hadn't seen him in almost a decade.
He called her a bitch and he told her she ruined his life. And she just told me how afraid she was because he was crying and causing a huge scene. And she said, "Mom, I went into therapist mode. I just tried to calm him."
After talking to Gareth for almost an hour, Amie left the event very worried. What's your reaction, Penny, when she was telling you this?
That's when we talked about security, and she said she was going to get pepper spray.
We decided to start sharing locations so I could track where she was.
Her close friend, Robert Koshland, says that sharing her phone's location was one of the few things Amie felt she could do to feel safe. The restraining order against Purcell had long expired, and because Purcell hadn't expressly threatened her, Robert says she didn't think going to police would help. Still, he says, Amie was very concerned.
That's when she said, "Look, if something happens to me, he did it."
She actually said that.
Yeah, no, she literally said that.
She's thinking that he can cause me harm, and the very next day, he finds her phone on the internet and starts texting her.
Gareth sent Amie a series of texts and later left her a tear-filled voicemail.
I have so much I need to say. Please give me a chance to just say it. Please.
That's when prosecutors say Amie decided to block his number.
I believe up until that point, he was trying to manipulate his way back into her life at the point that she made the decision to block him. That was her choice, and she had that right to do that.
Prosecutors say Purcell's started to plan to kill Amie on Valentine's Day.
Was that just a random date? Absolutely not. I think he wanted to make a statement by killing her on Valentine's Day.
On February 14, 2020, Amie went out with a group of friends around 7 p.m. 2 hours later, say prosecutors, surveillance cameras from her next-door neighbor's property were activated.
You get those Ring cameras that show a person that looks just like Gareth Purcell with gloves.
When he first comes into view, he covers the camera. And when the camera senses no more motion, it shuts off. And then he hops over the fence.
Into Amie's yard. Soon after, around 9 p.m., they believe Purcell's broke through that French door.
And that's consistent with Michael Herman. He heard something breaking upstairs early in the evening.
And I think he just got into the house, cut himself. I don't think he even realized he cut himself.
Leaving that blood police later found nearby. DNA testing would confirm it belonged to Purcell's. And Detective Masterson says where Purcell's went next was revealed by Amie's unmade bed.
I think he climbed in her bed. He was there waiting for her for quite a while.
How creepy is that?
Crazy creepy.
That's where Masterson believes Amie found him 4 hours later when she arrived home a little after 1 a.m.
She walks into her bedroom, and I think she just froze in shock and fear. And the one thing that was on the bed was her phone. So I think she actually threw her phone at him and turned and started to run out of the bedroom. And she's screaming, and they're fighting and they're wrestling.
How hard did Amie fight for her life?
I think she fought with everything she had.
He had something that appeared to look like a bite mark on his bicep.
And Purcell's also had that black eye.
To us, it was indicative of Amie fighting for her life, but she was obviously up against a much bigger, stronger opponent.
Prosecutors believe Purcell started choking Amie. And that's when Michael Herman yelled, they believe, catching Purcell's by surprise.
And I think that plan was definitely thwarted by the unbeknownst presence of Michael Herman there. I just don't believe that he even knew that somebody was home.
In his panic, they believe Purcell's dropped that syringe police found on the balcony. It was months before lab tests revealed what it contained: liquid nicotine.
A toxic poison that, if injected into someone, it would kill them.
Why kill her that way?
I mean, with that lethal dose of nicotine, people may not know what killed her. It may not be detected.
With his original plan interrupted, prosecutors believe that Purcell's carried Amie, barely conscious after being strangled, to the third-story balcony.
He lifts her right over the rail and then drops her to kill her.
Gareth Purcell's is caught on the neighbor's camera, hopping back over the fence. With their suspect and theory of the crime, the prosecutors were ready for trial. But they were surprised by Gareth Purcell's defense, blaming Amie for what happened that night. In August 2023, more than 3 years after Amie Harwick's death, her accused killer, Gareth Purcell, went on trial.
I almost didn't recognize him.
Right.
In their opening statements, prosecutors Victor Avila and Catherine Mariano told jurors why and how they believe Purcell ended Amie's life in the early morning of February 15, 2020.
Dr. Amie Harwick was murdered by defendant Gareth Purcell because he was obsessed with her. He strangled her, lifted her up over the balcony, and dropped her to her death.
I just pray that Amie was unconscious when she went over the balcony.
Tom and Penny sat through every second of the trial, even the most graphic moments.
I need to know what happened to my daughter.
And we wanted to be there for Amie.
Yeah.
Through the whole ordeal.
But the Harwicks were not alone. Also in the courtroom, a small army of Amie's friends, including Rudy Torres.
This is the last thing I could ever do for her.
Although fortified by her friends, nothing could prepare the Harwicks to hear, for the first time ever, Gareth Pursehouse's explanation about what happened the night Amie died. Defense attorney Evan Franzel claims that running into Amie in January 2020 at that award show had sent Purshouse into, quote, a deep, debilitating depression, unquote. And the only way out of it was to talk to Amie on Valentine's Day 2020.
His only intention that night was to speak to her.
What was your reaction to that?
Bull. To put it bluntly, they're making up stories because they have no defense.
And as for that nicotine-filled syringe found at the crime scene, Pursehouse's defense attorney says it wasn't for Amie.
He brought it intending to kill himself.
Why didn't he? No, he was on a mission to kill her.
He was wearing gloves when he went there. He covered up the cameras. What's the purpose in doing all that if you're gonna kill yourself there in front of her?
In this trial,
the defense tells the jurors they will hear from an accident reconstructionist who will show that Amie fell on her own. Defense attorney Franzel then shows the jury two images: a screenshot of the reconstruction showing an animated figure hanging from the balcony, and an undated photo of Amie posing on top of a balcony railing.
you'll see that she had a certain comfort level with the balcony railing.
Beautiful young lady, wasn't she? She looked glorious.
What was your reaction?
Ridiculous.
I couldn't take it seriously. It was just so far-fetched to me.
She's been strangled, she's debilitated. So for her to then climb over a 3-foot rail, do all that, it doesn't seem reasonable. It seems actually unreasonable.
The defense's opening concludes with this damning admission.
Yes, Gareth Purshouse was waiting in her home. He broke into her home. Had he not been there, she wouldn't have died that night. That is not in dispute. He set a chain of actions into motion that led to her death. But the evidence will show that he never intended on killing her.
Over the course of 10 days, the prosecution presented its evidence to prove that Gareth Purshouse did intend to kill Amie Harwick. Dozens of witnesses testified for the state, including Detective Masterson, now retired, Robert Koechlin, and of course, Amie's roommate, Michael Herman, the man who heard it all. Michael described for the jury how after that incident on the red carpet, Amie had been concerned about those French doors that Purshouse would later use to break into her home.
Amie had met with a handyman. I remember they were over by the glass doors, and Amie was pointing it out and telling him, we need to secure this.
Prosecutors also played for the jury this taped jail conversation between Purshouse and his friends after his arrest.
I guess I'm officially a bad boy now, right? I've always been kind of...
Just a couple of weeks after he's been arrested for murder, he's laughing with his friends. You never hear any moment of concern for Amie during that call.
Yeah, so it's not great. I'm not getting out of here.
Why was that important?
I think that's one piece of evidence to show a consciousness of guilt. So he knows what's coming because the evidence shows what he did. It proves what he did.
When it was the defense's turn to present its case and call its expert witness to show how Amie's fall from the balcony was an accident, the defense suddenly rested without calling a single witness.
Didn't that hurt the defense?
I am sure some jurors were wondering what happened, so I don't think that helps.
During closing arguments, defense attorney Robin Bernstein-Lev presented a new theory of what happened that night, that Amie may have attacked Purshouse.
We don't know who initiated the physical confrontation. It is just as likely, if not likelier, she preemptively attacked Gareth Pursehouse in order to subdue him because she was afraid of him.
You see that all the time, don't you? A 115-pound lady picking a fight with a 230-pound, 6'4" man. Just preposterous on its face.
Did that make you mad? Oh, it took all my willpower to stay in that seat, to keep my mouth shut.
During the state's closing arguments, it's Amie Harwick who has the last word, with prosecutor Mariano reading from an email Amie wrote to herself hours after her January 2020 encounter with Pursehouse.
The night I felt very scared. Gareth came up behind me and started screaming.
I'm pretty nervous that I'm more on his radar now. It terrifies me that he's obsessed with me for 9 years, thinks about me every day. He's focused on harming me.
That's the closest we've ever had to a victim testifying in their murder. I thought it was extremely devastating.
Jurors had 3 choices: murder in the first degree, murder in the second, or the lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter.
When it came time for deliberation, I think we all thought it would be rather quick. Day 1 went by, nothing.
I started getting a little worried and thinking, what could they be debating about?
What do you make of Gareth Purshouse's defense? See more evidence from the case at 48hours.com.
I felt nervous. Yeah. Because you never know.
As jurors met for a second day to decide Gareth Purshouse's fate, the waiting for a verdict began to weigh heavily on the prosecution.
It's incredibly nerve-wracking. The wait is the worst part.
And on Amie Harwick's friends and family.
And all you hear is just like a symphony of anxious bellies, just grrr. So everybody's nervous.
But as court was about to adjourn,
We were walking out of the courthouse, and Rudy called down and said, everybody get up here, there's a verdict.
Is it correct that the jury has a verdict? You can have the verdict forms over to the bailiff, please.
We, the jury, the above entitled action finding defendant Gareth Pursehouse guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Gareth Pursehouse guilty of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of lying in wait.
What did you feel at that moment?
A huge relief. Huge relief. I just started crying and I couldn't stop. It was like, phew, finally, after all this time, he's going to be held accountable for what he did.
2 months later, Pursehouse was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He didn't say a word. Amy's friend, Robert Koshland.
Justice was rendered, and that's good, but we shouldn't be here at all. This should never have happened to begin with. The hole in our lives remains.
He's impacted so many people with his actions, so many people. He devastated our family.
A family that has grown. After the verdict, Tom gathered Amy's friends, the ones who have stood by them every step of this journey.
I said, you're not our friends, you're family. You really have become our family.
Could you have gotten through this without them?
No.
I don't think so.
It's a testament to the amazing life and community Amie Harwick created.
She was really happy. She was really happy that she had really gotten her life together. Man, we were all happy.
Michael Herman says he still keeps replaying that night.
She's gone, and I'm still here. You want a second chance. I'm still trying to save her.
Michael Herman has a lot of survivor's guilt.
Oh my goodness. He did the exact right thing.
He made all the right decisions.
Do you feel your sister got justice?
I feel she did.
Amy's brother, Chris.
We wish that she still could be here to continue to help people, because that's what she was all about.
We lost a friend, but so many other people lost a healer.
I think of Amie every day because she helped me so much.
Emily Sears says she's struggling without Amie's guidance.
It's just so hard to feel safe when this is the reality of what happened to her and what happens to so many people.
Amie's loved ones are hoping to change that reality. After her death, a petition was created to rewrite California domestic violence laws, including a statute preventing restraining orders from expiring.
And our biggest disappointment was it lost all its impact when COVID shut everything down.
Prosecutor Catherine Mariano acknowledges that there are limits to the legal system.
By the time it gets to our table, we're in a position to act reactively rather than proactively. But as a society, I think we can always do better, right?
After the trial, Amie's parents headed home to Pennsylvania, the place where they first became a family with their little girl, and watched her grow into the woman admired and now missed by so many.
What's the hardest part? Just the absence, the quiet.
One huge void, one huge void.
And I miss our adventures.
Adventures remembered when they visit Amie's grave.
And I couldn't get a brighter orange. I know orange was your favorite color, but this is the closest I could get.
We're not the same people we were before, but we keep trying to be.
We miss you, Amie. Every day, we think of you.
Anything you wish you had been able to say to her?
Just to tell her one more time that I love her. I know she knew it, but I wanted to be able to say it.
Four women at the breaking point.
We were desperate, in fear every day.
An investigative reporter comes to the rescue. Does he become the target?
This was a very personal attack. He is 100% our hero.
Who killed Jeff Gehrman? 48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
James Brown and Papa Don't Take No Mess, Part 1. This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood on American Top 40, and number 8.
If you grew up in the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s, you knew that voice.
As Michael Jackson threatens to take over the top spot.
Casey Kasem was everywhere, counting down the hits.
Here's a tune that reached the top 10 a few weeks ago, got as high as number 9.
And if you're too young to remember that, how about this? Casey was the voice of Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
Here it comes. I love that man so much. I would have died for him. Casey and I were married here. There were 500 people here. We had our friends and family. It was the most incredible day of my life.
In 2014, Casey Kasem was dying of a Parkinson's-like disease. He was about to leave behind an enormous estate worth between $80 and $100 million. His family went to war over that money against each other.
Jean killed my father.
And when you say killed, do you mean murder?
What she did led to his death. That's a lie. It's a flat-out lie.
Jean Casey!
He was perhaps the most famous person ever known for counting backwards.
Radio legend Casey Kasem died today at the age of 82.
I ran back in the room and I picked him up in my arms and I held him so tight. And I said, I have never loved anybody like I have loved you.
She isolated him and tortured him. My dad was left to die in a facility.
They chemically restrained him. They removed his hydration, his nutrition, and all proactive medical care.
Not one decision was made by me. My dad was dying. And I looked at her and I said, Dad's not gonna be here for very long. You should get to the hospital.
And she said?
She wouldn't talk to me. That's what she did, always.
If you were going to count down the American Top 40 family feuds, this battle would be number 1.
The honor of King David,
I am.
What person in their right mind throws frozen meat at you, screaming biblical verses?
To the dogs, to the dogs.
There are always rabid dogs.
It's so crazy and so weird.
You're court ordered to be here today.
They lie, they cheat.
Abuse is abuse.
And they think that they can get away with it.
Why does she hate us so much?
Shame on these children. Shame.
We have been stalked, tracked, bullied.
None of what she says is ever true, so.
They killed my husband. They killed their father.
And there you are. I'm Casey Kasem. Till then, keep your feet in the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
His family says Kasem's wife, Jean, illegally moved him from a facility where the 82-year-old was receiving treatment.
He's very ill. He shouldn't be moved.
There's never been a Hollywood drama quite like the family feud between the second wife of Casey Kasem
I am the owner of the house.
and his children,
She unplugged my dad from his feeding tube.
involving intrigue, money, and ultimately his death. It was May 7, 2014, and you could say the mystery started right here. And imagine this, it was 2:30 in the morning.
That move that night was to get him out of the drama and to keep him safe and secure. We had had enough.
Jeannie Kasem, Casey's wife of 34 years, says she was convinced her husband's life was in danger. Jean Kasem told her story of Casey Kasem's drama for the first time to 48 Hours. What were you thinking, Jeannie?
I was thinking that it was time to protect my husband.
The legendary radio host who suffers from dementia was checked out of an assisted living facility by his wife.
It's a drama that really started all the way back in 1979, when Casey, then a divorced father of 3, met Jeannie Thompson. She was a secretary at his agent's office. Casey fell for her. They were married exactly 1 year later at one of LA's most luxurious hotels. So where are we right now?
Well, right now we're where it all began, which is where Casey and I got married. There were about 500 people here. It was an amazing day.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson married the couple.
It was a dream come true.
spectacular.
Jeannie Thompson was 22 years younger than Casey. She grew up listening to him.
I'm Casey Kasem. Now we're up to our long-distance dedication.
I was growing up on Guam at the time, and we only had Armed Forces radio over there. And I heard this DJ come on, and he announced this record. And I went, oh my God, who is this guy? Then he went, I'm Casey Kasem.
We're gonna miss the bus.
Keep your pants on. This will only take 5 minutes.
She is a former actress, best known for her role on Cheers.
She's got a way with colors and a flair for design. And
the happy couple eventually moved into this mansion in one of the chicest LA neighborhoods, Bel Air, just a hop away from the famous Playboy Mansion.
Welcome to the Kasem house.
Back then, Kasem was on top of the world.
Mr. Countdown himself, Casey Kasem. Casey, come on. Number 7 is a favorite of anyone who's ever been in love. Here it is.
And that voice,
He didn't think it was so good.
Really?
He said, I'm just the guy next door.
Hardly, he had launched American Top 40.
This is Casey Kasem, and we'd like to welcome you to American Top 40.
Heard on more than 1,000 radio stations around the world. He made hundreds of voiceovers.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And that signature voice of Scooby-Doo's pal, Shaggy.
This nightstick should do it.
Casey was much more than a voice to his 3 kids from his first marriage, Carrie, Mike, and Julie. He was their loving father.
My father imparted so much wisdom on all of us when we were children. Education, education, education.
Julie Kasem became a physician's assistant.
My dad imparted us to be humble, to treat people with kindness, to love those around you.
So this is the studios, and my father still has a studio here. It's changed a little bit.
His oldest daughter, Carrie Kasem, helped out on his radio show.
This is where he did American Top 40 and American Top 20. He would sit here, and he'd always have his water and his apple and rock candy for his voice. He had this
Carrie went into modeling, acting, and broadcasting.
Radio personality and television host Carrie Kasem.
His son Mike has a radio show in Singapore.
A song from one of America's top 10 albums. And here they are.
Casey's children claim everything changed once their father and Jeannie became engaged.
Was there an estrangement?
There was. Basically, they were upset with their father and angry with their father because he married me. And they were angry with me because I married their father.
Casey and Jeannie would have their own daughter, Liberty. And as his success grew, they lived a full life. Casey and Jeannie threw themselves into philanthropy.
you realize it really is important to give something back and to help repair the world, because that's got to be my legacy, I know.
Everything from environmental issues to animal rights to progressive politics.
We believed in a lot of charity.
In 2007, at the age of 75, Casey Kasem was diagnosed with a Parkinson's-like disease called Lewy body dementia.
It slows them down. They can either get rigid or shaking. It may sometimes affect their speech.
In 2009, he gave up his beloved radio show and signed off for the last time.
Now, one more time, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
Casey would have no financial worries with an estate valued between $80 and $100 million. But around that time, Jeannie claims, his children became focused on one thing.
It was all about the money. We became the Bank of Kasem, the personal ATM machine.
Around 2012, according to Jeannie, Casey was fed up and cut them off financially. Jeannie says the kids were furious, but instead of getting mad, Jeannie claims Carrie and the others did something almost unimaginable.
I believe that Carrie Kasem did kill my husband, that it was a long-term, premeditated plan, and he's gone.
It's just lie after lie after lie without any evidence.
Hear more about Casey from Jean, Carrie, and Julie on Facebook at 48 Hours.
The children of legendary DJ Casey Kasem are demanding to know, where is Kasem?
Those adult children had put targets on our backs.
Do you believe that your husband, Casey Kasem, feared his children?
Yes,
And feared that they could do what?
what they did,
Which was?
kill him.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. There's no more evil in this world than Jean Thompson Kasem.
Let me show you something. Jean says the alleged plot started in this very room behind me on a lonely stretch of Hollywood Boulevard back in 2007. She says that Casey's children lured their disoriented father from his Bel Air mansion to this very store to sign a very important document.
He was taken to a UPS store, and he was asked to sign his life away while he was on medications. He had sutures in his head. He did not have his glasses on, and he was out of it.
Does that mean the UPS store?
This video, shot by Carrie, shows Casey filling out a document that would give his children, and not Jeannie, the authority to be in charge of his future health care. It's video that Jeannie claims shows that Casey is obviously impaired. That's Casey's daughter, Julie.
5419 Suite C, you know what I mean? Put the address.
And this is the document Casey signed, laying the groundwork, Jeannie claims, that would lead to medical decisions that would kill Casey. Starting in 2013, as Casey's health declined, there were legal squabbles. Jeannie was trying to control when and where people could see Casey, including his own children.
I was in tears. I was speechless. I called my sister bawling, and I said, I just want to see Dad, and she won't let me.
Jeannie also says she and her daughter Liberty became targets of a harassment campaign. Were you living in fear?
Pretty much.
Were you ever personally threatened by someone?
It was a phone call that came in, I believe it was early in the morning, and there was a loud bang on the phone. And I held my ear. I said, oh my God, it sounds, what is that? And then I heard it again, and I recognized it as a gunshot.
And did you report this to the police?
Reported it to our lawyer. Reported a lot of the incidences to the police.
Jeannie alleges someone smashed her front gate, her mail was stolen, and more.
I believe that there's another surveillance van. There he is, right there. There he is. Go.
It was around this time that Jeannie claims Casey's children asked police and Adult Protective Services to check up on Casey.
They were called by Carrie, Julie, whomever.
Los Angeles police found no evidence of abuse or neglect. Jeannie claims that the harassment continued. She points to this demonstration right outside her home. Carrie and some supporters were demanding to see Casey.
After 3 months of no communication, we finally said enough's enough.
Finally here, at a rehab facility in Santa Monica, the mysterious last days of Casey Kasem's life took a dramatic turn. Casey was very sick. He'd been in and out of hospitals for months, and there had been endless legal fights, mostly over visitation.
I was thinking that it was time to protect my husband and leave the drama for all of us behind.
Jeannie says she was keeping Casey at the rehab center under a fake name, but somehow his adult children found out. Then, a few days later, on May 6th, Jeannie says Carrie and Julie gained access into the facility and even got into Casey's room. She says she was terrified and furious.
It was about the money. Casey no longer was of any use to them. It was all about the money.
It turns out that the adult children's power of attorney for medical decisions had never taken effect. Carrie and Julie decided they needed to go to court to try to get custody of their dad.
We had not seen him since February. Now this is May.
But Jean was having none of it. The day she found out they were headed to court, she made a dramatic move. At 2:30 in the morning, doctors say Jeannie ordered Casey's surgically implanted nutrition tube and IV disconnected and checked him out of the rehab facility. The doctor in charge of Casey's care later wrote the following letter to police, quote,
She was informed of the risks of doing so and was told she was placing Mr. Kasem in great bodily harm or possible demise. He's saying that you could have killed him.
That is not true.
Casey was loaded into a black SUV and disappeared into the darkness.
We know he's ill. Kasem's daughter doesn't know where he is.
Dad once told me, don't ever go up against Jean. You don't know what she's capable of.
The children of legendary DJ Casey Kasem are demanding to know where he is.
It was May 2014 when Casey Kasem vanished.
This is Casey Kasem on American Top 40 in Hollywood.
That iconic voice in the world was nowhere to be heard, and his case was making big news.
Casey Kasem's children have been saying that their stepmother has been isolating her.
Nobody knew where my dad was. Nobody.
Didn't understand why.
I don't want to speak specifically.
His children went on national television,
We want him back. He knows that we're his children.
pleading directly to Jeannie Kasem.
We've told Jean, take it all. Take everything. Keep it. Just give us our dad back.
They were not only outraged that Jeannie had taken their father, but about how she had done it.
Jean Kasem pulled my dad out at 2:30 in the morning out of a convalescent center, unhooked his G-tube, unhooked his IV. He was supposed to be transported with an ambulance on a certain kind of mattress. No, she threw him in the back of an SUV that she didn't even get into herself. With no pain meds, no food, no water, no nothing.
And we were devastated. We knew this was the beginning of the end.
But there would be no end to the family feud that had begun years earlier in that UPS store. Carrie and Julie insist they didn't trick their dad into signing that document, the one they hoped gave them control over his medical care.
Jean claims that Casey has no memory of ever signing that document.
Watch the tape.
Put the address.
Put UPS store.
You'll see my dad knew what he was doing, knew what he was signing.
5419.
Now, estate planning is normally done in a lawyer's office. You're at a UPS store.
He was terrified that Jean would find out.
Let me give you Jean's interpretation of what she told me. And this is you?
Yep.
And this is your father?
Yes.
Now, there's a circle here because he supposedly had had a medical procedure and had sutures in his head. Is that true?
To my knowledge, that is falsified information. In my opinion, Jean Kasem is a liar. 100% pathological liar.
48 Hours has confirmed that Casey had a procedure, but it was a minor one. 10 days before the signing, he had a small hair transplant. Just like that story, just about everything both sides told us is in dispute. Remember, ever since Casey married Jeannie, the relationship between the children from Casey's first marriage and their stepmother has been toxic. For example, take the arguments over money.
The only thing she ever wanted from my dad is money. That's it. They live off my father.
She says the same thing to me about you.
But I work. Listens to the actual. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm very proud of how hard I've worked. I've been on air for 21 years. You know, working multiple jobs sometimes to pay the bills. I own my own home. My dad didn't buy that for me.
The feud intensified after Casey's health deteriorated.
She had a plan to move him out of the house and cut us all off. Starting in 2012 is when I felt that the isolation began. I'm told by my sister, hey, I can't get a hold of Dad, I can't get a hold of Dad. My father was isolated and we were not allowed to see him anymore.
Remember that demonstration outside Casey's house? That day, Jeannie even called the cops.
My dad's very ill and he loves us.
Do you know why she's not allowing you guys to see?
There's many reasons, but none of them are true.
The whole drama climaxed in mid-May 2014. That's when Jeannie disappeared into the night with Casey. Desperate to find her dad, Carrie made this emotional appeal on TV.
If you've seen anything, please call the police, please.
Days after that, the battlefield in the War of the Kasems shifted to Las Vegas. That's where a private eye working for Carrie discovered the couple. Jeannie had taken Casey to a posh resort there, but not for long. Next, she put him on a charter flight. That private jet, carrying a frail Casey Kasem, flew northwest from Vegas, landing in Seattle. He was brought to a place not far from where I'm standing right now, 1,100 miles from his hospital bed in Santa Monica. And you wanted to get away from the madness in Los Angeles.
We were being photographed and followed to supermarkets and tortured, just tortured.
Casey ended up in a place called Silverdale, a small town in western Washington. For the first time since those final days, we brought Jeannie back.
Hi.
It's so good to see you. How are you?
Better now that I see you.
Yes, yes.
Shasta Bartelheim grew up with Jeannie, and they both hoped Casey would spend some quiet, peaceful days in her parents' home. Can you show me the bedroom? Where he was? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. This is where Casey was. His hospital bed was here. Very comfortable. My mother has a lot of Snoopy. She's an avid Snoopy collector.
So Casey was in his hospital bed with all these Snoopies around him.
Here. And we had all of his medical supplies. Some were here, some were in another room.
Was he in pain?
No. No, he was not in any pain in this house, ever.
Acting on a tip, Washington Adult Protective Service and Kitsap County Sheriff's deputies came by to check on Casey.
Mr. Kasem and his wife are here visiting. We did check on his welfare. He seems to be doing fine. He was upright. He could communicate.
But Casey's stay here was about to come to an end. Carrie won a new court order. She was coming from LA to get Casey and take him to a hospital. And things were about to get weird.
In the honor of King David.
Very weird.
To the dogs, to the dogs.
In late May 2014, Casey Kasem was counting down his days in Silverdale, Washington. In this home, tended to by a doctor, his family, and close friends.
He was content. He was very Happy, he smiled, shook our hands. It was nice.
Shasta Bartelheim, a nurse's assistant, has known Casey since 1980. She helped care for him.
Was he still able to converse, answer questions?
Yes, he would speak. It was a whisper, kind of a sound. When he talked, he wasn't grimacing in any pain.
On June 1st, 2014, when Carrie Kasem, armed with a court order, came to pick up her father and take him to the hospital, Jeannie was waiting.
Carrie arrives as usual with media in tow, her attorney.
We pull up, and then fire trucks show up, another ambulance shows up because Jean has caused a fit.
As seen in this broadcast on NBC News.
I saw geriatric Harley-Davidson riders that were forming a line to not let me in. It's so crazy and so weird.
That line of bikers was led by Shasta's brother.
Casey started yelling, "I don't want to go. I don't want to leave. No, no, no."
He was frightened. His eyes were big.
He didn't want to leave.
No, he didn't want to leave.
Acting on that court order, EMTs removed Casey.
So show me where they took him.
Down this hallway here, headed for the door.
He headed out, and what was out here out in the street?
The ambulance was there. There were a couple of ambulances.
Terrified, Jeannie called her lawyer.
I dropped the phone and I turned around to look for something, and there was meat in the kitchen, and
It was frozen hamburger.
I grabbed the meat and I came out here, and then I started walking this way with the meat in my hand.
Then she took aim.
Jean throws a piece of frozen meat at me, screaming nonsense.
Why meat, though? Why grab meat?
To me, they were treating my husband, an American treasure, Casey Kasem, like a piece of meat.
Insane, crazy. You saw the real Jean Thompson Kasem.
And so, if I may ask you, are you crazy, Jeannie?
No, I'm not.
Carrie dodged the meat attack, then jumped in the ambulance with her dad and sped away to a local hospital where a doctor was standing by.
The first thing he said to me, right when I got him in the hospital, "Your dad may not live very long, I'm just gonna let you know."
When Casey arrived here at St. Anthony's Hospital, his diagnosis was grim. He had, according to hospital records, a urinary tract infection and a stage 3 ulcer of his back. That's an open wound going almost to the bone. Within days, doctors would also diagnose septic shock, respiratory failure, a lung infection, and a host of other ailments.
The change was so drastic, it was maddening. He was extremely thin. His face was sunken in.
Shasta says Casey, who was taken out of the house that day, was nowhere near death.
Oh, no, heavens no, not at all.
The next day, Jeannie tried to get Casey out of the hospital.
On June 2nd, we had an emergency court hearing, and the judge ordered that he could return home. Once his personal physician spoke with the attending physician at the hospital.
Just before 10 that night, Jean arrived here at the hospital, along with Shasta and her attorney. They claim that the physician treating Casey had told them to come and pick him up.
And he said his overnight observation has concluded, and he's discharged.
But when she arrived, the doctor wouldn't release him, saying Casey was in pain.
He wasn't in any pain. They wanted him to be in pain.
Jeannie refused to leave without Casey.
She started screaming. They had to call the police to get her out of the facility.
And 3 days later,
we had 3 doctors come in and say, "This is futile. Your father's dying. His organs are shutting down. He can no longer digest food."
Carrie and her siblings now faced a wrenching decision. They say they followed a doctor's recommendation to stop Casey's hydration and nutrition.
I couldn't hear it. I got upset. I said, isn't there something we can do? What if we try this? What if we try that? Because I was the fighter. I wasn't going to let him go.
On June 6th, the Kasem children alerted Jeannie.
Julie called my lawyer and said to my lawyer that we're losing him. She should come to the hospital right away.
Jeannie and Liberty rushed to the hospital, but claimed they were only permitted to see Casey for a few minutes.
We were given 5 minutes to say goodbye to a man that I was married to for 34.5 years. He looked at me and he was scared to death. I went to the bed. I held his hand. He grabbed my arm.
Did Casey say anything to you?
He said that he loved me. And I told him that I loved him.
Jeannie was desperate to get Casey's life support restored.
My first and foremost thing was to save my husband's life. Every second counted.
She flew back to California, hoping to get the court to order it. Over the next few days, there would be several motions filed.
The doctors said, unfortunately, there is nothing more we can do to keep your father alive. That was the hardest thing to hear. That's our dad.
On June 15th, 2014, Casey Kasem, the beloved radio icon, passed away. He was 82.
We were all surrounding him on the bed with our hands on him. Every single one of us was touching him as he took his last breath.
We were all there, all of us, and who was missing? His wife and Liberty. It was 100% their choice not to be there.
This court order says you can visit him at any time. No one can stop you. And what Carrie is saying is that you chose not to see Casey anymore in the hospital.
That's not true. That is not true at all. We were afraid to go to the hospital.
In death, the war of the Kasems grew even more fierce.
He did not die of natural causes. They planned it, and they killed him.
Jean killed my father. Whether it was premeditated or whether it was just by her careless actions. If someone killed your father, wouldn't you want justice?
In June 2014, Casey Kasem's death was felt across the globe.
And there was one guy on the radio I used to listen to all the time who passed away today, and so I want to dedicate this song to Casey Kasem. Travel safely, my angel.
And travel he would. Casey's body was taken from Silverdale to SeaTac Airport, where it was flown to Montreal.
And why Montreal?
He was there for a time because his burial was being obstructed.
Casey's body remained in Canada on ice for weeks. As his widow, Jeannie had full control over his burial.
Casey and I had spoken about this, about where he would like to be buried, and it was in Israel.
But Casey's children thought that was crazy.
My dad's as American as apple pie. He lived in Los Angeles for 58 years. He wanted to be buried in Los Angeles.
Casey's body took flight again, this time to, of all places, Norway. Where Jeannie orchestrated a burial fit for a king. Only she and Liberty were at Casey's gravesite. But they did bring their own camera crew.
Why Norway, of all places?
There are concrete reasons for that. But because I'm in litigation, I can't share that with you.
My dad's never been to Norway. She's not Norwegian.
What is going on here?
When you tell so many lies, you get caught up in them.
After Casey's death, the battle between the Kasems went nuclear. Both sides in this epic family feud sued the other for wrongful death.
What she did to my dad was elder abuse. Straight and simple. That trip is what cost my dad his life. He could have had 2 or 3 more years. She took him from us. You want to call it murder? You want to say she killed him? He's dead because of her.
Casey's children accused Jeannie of a pattern of neglect, where she secretly moved Casey from one care center to the next.
And she used the hospitals and the facilities as a babysitter so she didn't have to take care of him.
I say that that's a flat-out lie. I was there. I was in touch with the doctors.
Jean Kasem accuses the children of hastening his death by pulling the plug on Casey.
They chemically restrained him. They removed his hydration, his nutrition, and all proactive medical care. It was the equivalent of leaving Casey Kasem in the desert to die. I really don't feel well.
It's been a never-ending drama, even when Carrie's lawyers finally deposed Jean.
Court order to be here today.
She fainted, blaming the episode on medication. And besides accusing each other of killing Casey, there's that battle royale over his fortune. As seen in this 2017 Inside Edition video, the mansion has become the latest battleground.
The house hasn't been taken care of. The taxes aren't paid. They've destroyed everything. They've killed everything. There's no electricity on. There's no running water.
At the request of Casey's children, a court-appointed trustee attempted to remove and store some of Casey's memorabilia.
How does it feel to go through Casey Kasem's belongings after he was murdered?
Meanwhile, the fight over Casey's assets, lawyers say, could take years.
Today, you are fighting for damages and access to your father's money.
I am fighting for justice. That is what I'm fighting for. My father's wife, Jean Thompson Kasem, didn't want us at the house, wouldn't pass phone calls along.
In 2014, Carrie started a foundation to help pass legislation to protect the visitation rights of children.
I was doing everything I possibly could to see my dad. And the law didn't help me in California.
To date, 12 states have passed a visitation bill, including California.
It passed a year after he died, but I kept fighting till I won.
Despite Carrie's claims of elder abuse and negligence, the Los Angeles District Attorney declined to prosecute Jeannie Kasem, citing insufficient evidence.
The police and the DA won't do a damn thing. That is why we're fighting. Take the money, take it all. I want her in jail.
In November 2018, Washington's Gig Harbor Police Department concluded an investigation into Casey's death. They found his older children were authorized to make medical decisions on his behalf, and there was no evidence of homicide. While the legal wheels grind ahead, this American icon, with his own star on Hollywood Boulevard, is buried in an unmarked grave in Oslo, Norway.
I'm gonna bring my father back to the United States of America, where he belongs.
I'm Casey Kasem. And just as Casey Kasem's legendary voice is certain to carry on,
Till then, keep your feet in the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
his family is determined to keep fighting.
I'm not going to quit. I'm the daughter of a Marine.
My father is right here with me right now and every single day of my life. She can never take him away from me again.
Learn more about the life of Casey Kasem from his close friends at 48hours.com.
Natalie Wood was one of the biggest film stars imaginable.
Her death more than 30 years ago, still a mystery. The case reopened.
Do you believe Natalie Wood was murdered?
It's suspicious enough to make us think that something happened.
48 Hours, next on CBS.